Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I'm so excited and a little nervous. What I wanted to do with our time together is share with you how my story and Kilimanjaro helped me become an advocate for folks with disabilities. I promise that's all going to link up. But before we get into that, let's sort of Tarantino this and go back to the beginning. And let me just start by addressing the elephant in the room, and we'll get the awkwardness out of the way. That obviously, no, your eyes aren't deceiving you. This is a new jacket. And thank you. And I obviously don't have any legs. I was born with legs, but I was born with a genetic disease that caused the muscles in my legs not to work. So at the age of 2, they removed at the knee in hopes that I could use prosthetic legs and get around that way. But unfortunately, that didn't work out. So then at the age of 5, they removed just below my pelvis, which is basically what you see now. Now, after my surgeries, my family and I were told by the doctors that I would never walk, sit up, or be a functioning member of society. But my family and I refused to believe that. So we set out to prove to not only ourselves, but the rest of the world, that we could start by redefining what was possible for me. Now, I think when people meet me and hear that part of my story, they assume that having a physical disability was like the biggest challenge that I faced. But it actually was the easiest part. The next part was a whole slew of different smaller challenges. And more specifically, why I'm here today is to talk about when I entered the workforce. Now, for me in particular, I come from a middle-class family who worked really hard and instilled the ideals of working really hard and getting a good job. And I got my first job at 13 working for my grandmother at a real estate business, which was amazing. But at 15 and 16, I was ready for like a real job. And so I went out in my hometown of Rock Springs, Wyoming, and I applied at all the things that a 15, 16-year-old would, fast food and retail, and I couldn't even get an interview. And I don't know for sure, I can only speculate. The first part was maybe my age, and the second part was I think people were a little intimidated with my disability and were making assumptions about what I could or couldn't do. And I felt really frustrated by that because I was watching all of my friends have no problem finding a job. And so we found this amazing program in my hometown that helped folks like myself and young people find jobs and help people understand what they can do. And so this incredible woman introduced me to Dave Hanks, who is the director of the Rock Springs Chamber of Commerce. And I knew it was different from the moment I walked in. He saw the skills that I had and basically said, what do we need to do to accommodate you here? We'd love to hire you. You clearly have people skills and your admin skills look pretty decent, so how can we help? I was like, well, you've got a tall counter. All I really need is a stool to reach the counter. Or if you're cool, I'm fine to just crawl up and sit on the counter when people come in and have inquiries. And he said, great. And Dave Hanks was the first person that really nurtured all of those skills inside me and saw the potential that I had. He saw that I had a disability, which is really important. I don't want you to see past that. It exists. That's okay. I'm really proud of it. But we also need to see all of the incredible skills and things that I could bring to the Chamber of Commerce at that time. He was the first person to do that. I graduated high school, went to college, got it into the real world, same sort of thing, had a really hard time finding a job, eventually found something that gave me what I considered to be the North American dream. I had money and stuff, but I was really looking for a job that also provided purpose. And a good friend of mine 10 years ago invited me to go to Kenya with this organization called We that I work for now, which is based out of Canada. And it was a life-changing experience. The moment that changed everything for me was not only seeing the work that they were doing overseas with international development and how they were empowering young people here in North America and around the world, but I got to share my story with some local kids at a school there. And after I told them everything, a young girl raised her hand and she said to me that she didn't know something like this, meaning the loss of my legs, could also happen to white people too. And for me, that was the first time where I realized that I could use not only my story, but my disability in a way to help people look at the world differently and hopefully look at challenges differently. So when I came back from that trip, within a few months, I had quit my job, packed up my life, moved from Phoenix, Arizona, where I was living at the time, to Toronto, Canada, where I live now, to be a motivational speaker for this organization called We. Now, I've been traveling for the last 11 years with them, speaking across the world. But halfway through my journey, I felt guilty because I was telling folks, you need to get out there and you need to make the world a better place. But I was just talking about it and I wasn't actually doing it. And so 7 years ago, I came up with this wild idea to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And in doing so, I wanted to raise $500,000 for clean water in East Africa, who at the time was facing one of the largest droughts they've seen in over 60 years. I trained for an entire year. June of 2012, with my 2 best friends, I set out to climb Kilimanjaro. The hope was I was going to do half on my hands and half on my wheelchair. But when I got to Kilimanjaro the first day, I did about 80% of my hands and 20% of my chair, and that's how the rest of the journey was going to be. I'm really grateful that my friends said they would come because they were amazing at saying encouraging words and physically helping me when there was parts to do so, carrying me above their head, helping push me in my wheelchair. What I didn't anticipate, though, is that on summit day, around 18,000 feet, my buddies got altitude sickness and I didn't. We joke it's because of my height, but I don't know if that's real. I watched my support system crumble before me, and this was the first time in my entire life where I wished that I had legs that day. Because if I had legs now, I could be the one to carry my friends like they had carried me. But I don't have legs, so I did what my parents taught me, and that was to focus on the things that I could do. I stood in between my two best friends, and I said this journey started with the three of us, and it's going to end with the three of us. And this is what happened next. We started to head up the mountain to Uhuru Peak, and that was a shock. It was snow, all snow.
I think I'm breaking down. Remember I told you guys back in Toronto, it's going to go to a point where it's physically demanding, and it's going to go mental push. Take those steps, those final steps. And you guys are experiencing it now.
Both Alex and Dave were really, really struggling. Alex was like falling to his knees.
You're okay.
And every step was excruciating.
Look a little bit further, we can make it.
I was exhausted. My arms were killing me. My hands were numb from standing on them. We walked so far. And I just tried to muster up everything that I had left.
Someone come and save my life.
I'm gonna make you guys
Maybe I'll sleep when I'm dead, but now it's like
This is for every kid that has been bullied. This is for every kid who's had a disability and felt like they couldn't do things or didn't belong. This is for every person who felt they couldn't change the world. This is for every person who feel like they were lost on their journey. This is for every person who has ever tried to figure out what their life is about. I was told I would never walk or be a functioning member of society. And I'm at the top of the largest freestanding mountain in Africa. This is for you. So we made it to the top. Thank you. And we cried and we celebrated because we reached well over our goal, which provided clean water to 12,500 people for life in 2 communities in East Africa. And then over the last 10 years or so, I've gone on to do other campaigns. I walk between 2 cities in Canada, get with my 2 best friends to raise awareness about how far women and girls have to walk to collect water every single day. Between this campaign and Kilimanjaro, we raised enough money that now 26,500 people have access to clean water. I did a bus tour across Canada thanking local Canadians. We have a lot of celebrity ambassadors I've gotten to host and get to know. And I mean this genuinely. Demi Lovato and I have become good friends. And when she was going on her world tour in 2014, she invited me to come on tour with her, to open for her shows every single night, and to bring this message and the work that we do at We and my story to her audiences. And then recently I started a YouTube channel to give people a glimpse into my life. But let me get to why I told you all of these things. Not because I want you to think I'm cool. Well, maybe the Demi thing a little bit. When I went for an interview at this organization that I work for now called We, it was the same as when I went to the Chamber of Commerce. They saw the potential that I had and the unique perspective and skills that I could bring to the organization that no one else could at that time. I was the competitor. I was the person that they were looking for. And I don't say this arrogantly, but I'm very confident in saying that over the last 10 years, I've brought in over $1 million to this organization, whether it's through selling our volunteer trips or the campaigns that I've done. And it's also given me a purpose and a way to channel all of these things. And I'm really grateful for We because they saw my disability, but they saw how that can actually affect their organization in a positive way. This is what we're looking for. Folks like myself and other folks with all sorts of disabilities are just looking for a chance to show you the skills that they have to come make your organization or your foundation or your charity a little bit better. And they're just looking for you to give them that chance. I know sometimes this is scary, and I know the number one question that a lot of people or statement that they're a lot afraid of is, it's going to cost too much to fix up our office or to help with these accommodations that this person with disability might need. Well, number one, if your office isn't accessible, that's a huge problem, number one. Number two, the US Job Accommodation Network did a study last year where they found that 59% of folks with disabilities that were hired needed 0 accommodations. And for the small percentage that actually did, it was about $500 or less that it took. And what's even more incredible here in the United States is the government offers tax credits and ways for your business in particular to help with some of those costs, should they be a little bit higher. So that shouldn't be an issue. And if we use me as an example, and we look back at all the jobs that I've had, Chamber of Commerce, I needed a stool, $30. That's it. When I worked at retail in college. Again, all I needed was a stool, $30. For one of our buildings at the time wasn't accessible, so they put in a lift, a couple $100. That's all that it was. That's all that I needed. Now, I'm using me as an example, and I have a physical disability. Obviously, there's a lot of other folks with disabilities that need different things, so I can only use myself in this space. That's the first piece. Cost isn't a factor. So get that out of your head if that's where you're at. The second piece, and this is something that I didn't know either, folks with disabilities represent $1 trillion market segment of untapped folks. So what that means is, by hiring folks with disabilities, you tap into that market and show folks, we care about folks with disabilities. This is a group of people that doesn't feel heard and doesn't feel seen. And simply by starting to hire folks with disabilities, as Anne was saying about folks with autism, they're bringing in this whole new base of people, allies from the disability community, as well as bringing in a whole new revenue stream of folks that you may not have tapped into before. The last piece, and I think is the piece that is the most important, is that folks with disabilities bring in innovation and creativity that you wouldn't have seen before. I don't think our founders at We would have ever thought to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And to be very fair, they're two incredible white men. But as someone with a disability, it was more impactful and I could bring in more money. Now, the cause and the purpose of why we were doing it was the most important to me. But the secondary piece of that was I was the only person that could do that in a successful way. So by bringing these folks with disabilities in, you're looking at business and the world through a different lens, a lens that you may not have seen before. And to provide that innovation and creativity is priceless. The other piece, and Anne sort of alluded to this in her intro, which I think is really amazing, what folks with disabilities also do is they can have a very incredible positive impact on your culture, both with employees and also customers coming in as well. So if you look at employees in particular, and I'm making a bit of a blanket statement here, but most folks with disabilities have a heightened sense of empathy, just based on the challenges that many of us have faced throughout our lives. And by bringing that sense of empathy in, and this would be with anyone, but I think with folks with disabilities in particular, is that sense of empathy starts to rub off on other folks in the organization. And specifically if you're customer service based, empathy is super important because there can be some challenging days. But by accessing that type of empathy, you can really understand or have an idea of what people are going through. And I think you can help your customers better in that regard. On the flip side, it also does amazing things for your employees. It changes the culture a little bit in your organization. And as Anne said, and this shouldn't be the huge piece, but it's an important piece. Number one, this is just the right thing to do. But number two, we all feel proud of this type of work to make a world inclusive for everyone, and specifically a workforce inclusive for everyone. So I guess for me, my question for you that I want to leave you with here today is, what's stopping you? Folks, thank you so much for allowing me to share a bit of my story with you. Thank you so much to Bloomberg. I really, really appreciate it.